Rehan Pradeep never expected a lost USB drive to uncover the darkest secret in Pollachi. Anvika Murrah had buried her trauma for years until a girl's suicide forced her to speak. Inspector Kavya Rathi knew the system was broken, but she didn't know how deep the rot went. Together with Meenal Ghosh, a fearless blogger, and Rehan, a student turned whistleblower, they exposed India's most chilling and hidden sex trafficking ring, protected by money, power, and silence. What began with scattered clues soon exploded into a nationwide reckoning. And yet, the most dangerous player, Sid Varan, was still out there. Watching. Rehan Pradeep had just started his second year at the Government Arts College in Pollachi when a strange USB drive landed in his lap literally. It slid off a senior's desk during a group assignment in the library. Rehan didn't think much of it until he got home and plugged it into his laptop. What opened before him wasn't study material, but a collection of blurred videos and hidden camera footage showing young girls, some in school uniforms, being filmed without their consent. Panic surged through him. At first, he thought it was some sort of prank, but as the file names revealed dates going back 2 years and faces he vaguely recognized from the college, it became clear this was something sinister. He couldn't sleep that night. The faces haunted him. He didn't know what to do. Was this blackmail material? Was someone watching him now that he'd opened the files? Rehan deleted the drive's contents, but the images had already burned into his memory. He didn't tell anyone. Not yet. A week later, news broke of a girl from a nearby town attempting suicide. She left behind a note accusing powerful people of ruining her life. That girl, he realized with a chill, had appeared in one of the videos. Meanwhile, in a distant neighborhood in Pollachi, Anvika Murrah sat quietly with her hands trembling. She had spent 2 years trying to pretend none of it happened. When she was just 17, a group of men lured her into a car under the pretext of giving her a ride home. What followed was a cycle of threats, blackmail, and relentless abuse. But now she knew she couldn't stay silent anymore. The suicide of the other girl broke something inside her. She reached out anonymously to a local blog run by Meenal Ghosh, a social worker known for writing about women's safety. Meenal took the story seriously. She had been hearing stories, whispered between students, signs of something darker festering beneath the town's polished surface. While Meenal investigated, Inspector Kavya Rathi was already on alert. A confidential report had come to her from a cybercrime officer in Coimbatore, stating that dozens of IP addresses in Pollachi were uploading suspicious video content to foreign servers. She began digging into phone records and surveillance logs. Her leads pointed to Sid Varan, a bright but deeply manipulative college dropout with a knack for coding. Kavya started trailing him discreetly, noting his frequent visits to a gated farmhouse on the outskirts of town registered under the name of Nikhil D'Souza, a businessman with friends in the local administration and close ties to M.L. Shyam Sundar Pillai. The deeper Rehan tried to push the incident from his mind, the more the world around him screamed for attention. Flyers of missing girls appeared on campus notice boards. A classmate spoke of receiving anonymous threats after rejecting an internship offer. Even CCTV footage from hostels started vanishing mysteriously. It became harder to believe this was isolated. Rehan finally reached out to Meenal, using a pseudonym, and shared his story. She pieced together the dates and locations and realized something horrifying. The same group of men, Sid Nikhil and their ring, were exploiting dozens of young women using an organized system. They'd lure, trap, record, and blackmail them into silence. That week, Jeevan Krishnan, a young data analyst who had once reported similar findings 2 years ago, suddenly vanished again. His earlier claims were dismissed by local police as baseless, and no follow-up was made. But Meenal tracked down his archived blog posts and shared them with Inspector Kavya. What linked it all together wasn't just the crimes, it was the people protecting them. Politicians, businessmen, even local media houses had a role in suppressing the truth. At the center of it all was the farmhouse, a place where evidence disappeared and lives were shattered. A place that looked innocent from the outside, surrounded by palm trees and open skies, but its walls hid the darkest secrets of Pollachi. The town remained unaware that the biggest scandal of their generation was unfolding in plain sight. Inspector Kavya Rathi knew she was treading dangerous ground. Every move she made, every file she opened, felt like someone was watching. The pressure from her superiors was growing. Twice her reports were returned with vague objections. Once, her access to digital evidence was suddenly revoked, citing a technical error. But she had seen enough to know this wasn't a glitch. There was a deliberate effort to bury what was emerging, and that made her more determined than ever to expose it. She began working off the grid, using a personal laptop, storing evidence on encrypted drives. With help from Meenal Ghosh, she started mapping connections between victims, known suspects, and the flow of money. A pattern formed. The same names kept appearing. Girls were targeted at bus stops, libraries, even inside coaching centers. Each victim was filmed, then coerced into silence through fear and shame. In some cases, their families were threatened. Many girls left town without explanation, and others simply disappeared from public life. Anvika Mehra was one of the few who stayed. She had become Meenal's silent informant, recalling details, faces, cars, and locations. With a photographic memory, she pointed out small but vital facts like a scar on Sid Varun's hand, or a security camera near the back of the farmhouse. Rehan, still shaken by what he had discovered, joined them in secret. He had access to the college network, which helped retrieve deleted messages and logs from student emails. In one email thread, they found evidence of fake internships being used as bait. Promises of job offers, photo shoots, and modeling auditions were traps set by the ring. One of the biggest discoveries came from a pawn shop near the market. A young man had sold a hard drive that caught the attention of the owner due to its contents. The shopkeeper, out of fear, never turned it in. But when Inspector Kavya traced the man through local CCTV and found the shop, she convinced the owner to hand it over. What she found was chilling. The hard drive contained folders labeled with girls' names and timestamps, each corresponding to a recorded assault. Some videos were dated back 3 years, others were recent. Even worse, some girls were shown in multiple folders, indicating long-term abuse. Kavya's investigation revealed that Nikhil D'Souza's business empire was a shell operation. His construction company, his textile outlets, everything was used to launder money from the illegal trafficking ring. Financial records were doctored to hide payments made to various individuals, including police officials and political figures. It was clear now why evidence kept vanishing. The rot ran deep. People who were meant to protect the citizens were instead protecting the predators. Rehan stumbled across a disturbing connection. While going through student council data, he found that one of the girls who went missing had filed a complaint with the college months ago, but the file had been marked resolved without explanation. When he confronted the clerk off record, the man confessed that someone from the MLA's office had visited and taken the file. That missing girl, Arohi Basra, was never seen again. Her last phone ping was from near the farmhouse. Kavya put Arohi's name on the high-priority list and reopened her case officially, this time without informing her department. Meanwhile, Meenal arranged a hidden interview with Anvika. Her story, recorded on a burner camera, was prepared to be released to international media outlets if anything happened to her or the others involved. Despite their growing fear, the trio Kavya, Meenal, and Rehan pressed forward. The evidence was stacking up, and with it, the risk. Sid Varun had gone underground, and Jeevan Krishnan's family claimed they hadn't heard from him in days. The farmhouse, which once seemed untouchable, was now the target of their quiet operation. Still, There were forces watching every move they made. Phones tapped, shadows outside homes. Rehan once returned to find his room searched, his laptop missing. Kavya received an unmarked envelope at her doorstep with a single printed sentence: "Drop this, or they will disappear one by one." But it was already too late. The truth had started to surface, and Pollachi would never be the same again. The air in Pollachi had shifted. Whispers turned to murmurs, and fear began to seep into public conversations. Rumors of a sex trafficking ring linked to prominent names were no longer just conspiracy theories. People had started connecting. DOTs, yet no one dared speak aloud. Families warned daughters to stay home, and students who once laughed freely now walked in groups, eyes constantly searching their surroundings. Behind this quiet paranoia, the trio Inspector Kavya Rathi, Meenal Ghosh, and Rehan Pradeep were working restlessly to reach the heart of the operation. Kavya's biggest hurdle was legal. With senior officials compromised, she couldn't request official warrants or backup without alerting the criminals. So she began forming a small, trusted team of junior officers, all handpicked after background checks. These officers worked under the guise of regular patrols, but were collecting surveillance footage, license plate records, and phone logs from unregistered towers around the farmhouse. One shocking detail emerged: the farmhouse had its own private network, disconnected from standard ISP lines. Whatever was happening inside was being transmitted elsewhere offshore. Meenal, through her contacts in journalism, reached out to an independent investigative group based in Bangalore. She handed over redacted versions of the videos and documentation, ensuring that if anything happened to their team, the story would still break. The journalists were horrified by the extent of the abuse and began investigating the financial links. Their findings exposed that the ring had ties not just across Tamil Nadu, but into Kerala and Andhra Pradesh. It wasn't a local operation, it was part of a far-reaching, well-funded network. Meanwhile, Rehan found himself in greater danger. His identity was somehow leaked. He noticed strange men following him after classes. His social media was hacked, and fake allegations were posted about him. He knew this was a scare tactic meant to isolate him. His parents, unaware of his involvement, urged him to stay away from political matters. But Rehan, though terrified, refused to back down. With Anvika's support, he continued to dig into the academic links, names of professors, event organizers, and agents who had quietly facilitated the trafficking. It was during this phase that a major breakthrough occurred. A former driver for Nikhil D'Souza reached out to Meenal through a disposable number. He was willing to talk, but only in person. They arranged to meet at an abandoned rice mill at the edge of town. The man, clearly shaken and paranoid, handed over a flash drive containing surveillance clips from the farmhouse's garage and basement, footage he had copied while doing maintenance work. It showed girls being transported blindfolded. Some were unconscious. A few were screaming as they were dragged. The faces of the perpetrators were clearly visible, including Sid Varan, and shockingly, a familiar police inspector from Kavya's own department. This revelation hit hard. Kavya had suspected corruption, but seeing a colleague's face among the abusers made her sick. She now understood the scale of betrayal involved. Her plan had to change. No more cautious steps. They had enough to act, but timing would be everything. Together, they devised a plan to expose the ring publicly. The journalists in Bangalore were ready to release their report within 72 hours. In that window, Kavya would lead a covert raid on the farmhouse and seize physical evidence, while Meenal and Rehan would prepare victims' testimonies and timelines for immediate media broadcast. It was a high-risk move. If they failed, their names would be buried along with the story. But if they succeeded, the wall of silence around Pollachi would finally collapse. That night, just as final preparations were being made, Rehan received a chilling message on his phone. It was a short video clip, Anvika, bound and gagged in a dark room. A distorted voice followed. "You went too far." "She pays the price." Everything stopped. The urgency became personal. The plan could no longer wait. Anvika's life now depended on what they did next. And time was running out. Panic surged through Rehan's veins as he replayed the video of Anvika over and over, searching for clues. Her eyes were swollen but alive. In the corner of the frame, a broken wall socket and part of a rusted chair were barely visible. He quickly forwarded the video to Inspector Kavya and Meenal. The message had changed everything. What was supposed to be a well-timed operation had now turned into a desperate race to save a life. Kavya assembled her trusted team within an hour. She shared the video and freeze-framed the background. One of her officers, who had grown up near Pollachi's industrial zone, recognized the chair as the kind used in abandoned poultry sheds near the old highway. That gave them a starting point. While the team scoured the area with unmarked vehicles, Kavya reached out to her last remaining contact in the Intelligence Bureau, a retired surveillance tech who still had access to drone feeds used during a previous narcotics case. He agreed to help, and by midnight, they had access to aerial visuals of the industrial belt, scanning for any sign of activity. Meanwhile, Meenal contacted the journalists in Bangalore and asked them to move the release up by 24 hours. The data, the images, the videos, they had to go public now. It was their only shield. She also contacted international human rights organizations and uploaded the basic facts onto a secure server. The story was now too big to silence. As the drone combed the region, Rehan's mind kept returning to something Anvika had once said. A strange buzzing sound that played near the farmhouse whenever she was held there. It wasn't electricity, she had explained, but something louder, more constant. Kavya realized what it could be, a nearby transformer. Cross-checking locations, they found an abandoned poultry shed located within 50 meters of a high-voltage station. The drone zoomed in, and there it was, a white van parked beside a collapsed brick wall. Without wasting another second, Kavya led the operation herself. 5 unmarked vehicles moved in quietly. They cut off the shed's escape routes and stormed in with body cams rolling. Inside, they found a maze of wooden crates and storage boxes. In the back, under a tarp, Anvika was found terrified, dehydrated, but alive. The sight of her being carried out, wrapped in Kavya's jacket, was a moment of triumph shadowed by rage. A camera was still running in the corner. She had been recorded even now. As the officers secured the area, they found something else: ledgers, burner phones, drugs, and boxes of documents labeled with code names. The evidence was overwhelming. Sidvaran wasn't present, but fingerprints were found on one of the crates. Bloodstains, likely from other victims, were collected for testing. Anvika, even in her weakened state, managed to whisper names, locations, details. She had overheard. At the same time, the Bangalore journalists released the story to the public. Within hours, it spread across social media. Major news channels picked it up. #Pollachi Truth trended nationally. Faces of the accused were broadcast with Nikhil D'Souza and Emma Shyam Sundar Pillai at the center. Public outrage exploded. Protests erupted in front of police stations and government offices. For the first time, the silence broke not just in Pollachi, but across the nation. But victory didn't come without a cost. Kavya was suspended pending internal inquiry. Her raid was deemed unauthorized, and her chain of command questioned. Her methods. Meenal's blog was hacked, and threats flooded her inbox. Rehan was attacked while leaving campus but survived with a fractured arm. Yet none of them stopped. The farmhouse was sealed. Search teams uncovered a concealed basement soundproof, lined with cameras, and stained with years of hidden crimes. The extent of the abuse became clearer each day. Over 50 victims were identified from footage. Some came forward. Some remained silent. Others had vanished beyond recovery. Still, Sid Varin remained missing. Nikhil D'Souza denied everything. Shyam Sundar called it a political conspiracy. But the evidence was undeniable now, and the court of public opinion had spoken. As Anvika rested in a hospital bed, guarded by police, she asked only one question: how many more are still in the dark? They had struck a blow, but the war was far from over. The days that followed were a blur of headlines, court summons, and arrests. The nation watched as Pollachi's darkest secrets spilled onto primetime news. For a brief moment, justice seemed within reach. But beneath the surface, powerful forces began working to suppress the damage. Sid Varun was still on the run, and with him, the most incriminating evidence was feared lost. His knowledge of the network, its offshore accounts, international clients, and accomplices was the missing link. Without him, the case risked collapse in court. Inspector Kavya Rathi, although suspended, refused to sit still. Operating from a safe house provided by one of her few remaining allies, she began tracking recent financial movements. A payment trail surfaced: small transactions made from an obscure location in coastal Karnataka. It led to a property rented under a fake name. A closer look through satellite imaging revealed a boat dock nearby, and with local help, she was able to confirm a man matching Sid's description had been spotted boarding a speedboat days ago. Kavya contacted the Coast Guard discreetly. By the time they reached the suspected location, the boat was gone, but its GPS tracker had logged a route leading to Lakshadweep. A manhunt was quietly launched. Interpol alerts were issued. Still, Sid managed to evade capture. With every passing day, his absence emboldened those who had tried to silence the story. Key witnesses were threatened. Lawyers backed out of the case. Journalists received defamation notices. Meenal's server was hacked again, and her backup blog was taken offline. Despite the pressure, survivors began to speak. Anvika, though still recovering, gave an official statement to a retired judge appointed by the Supreme Court. Her testimony was harrowing, detailed, and matched multiple entries found in the seized farmhouse documents. One by one, more girls came forward, some anonymously, others publicly. They spoke of fear, of being drugged, filmed, and used as leverage. Some had been forced to comply for months, unable to tell their families, afraid of shame and retaliation. Rehan, now recovering at home, uploaded a detailed digital map linking names, dates, locations, and transactions. It went viral. Students and activists across the country joined in, demanding justice, holding protests in universities from Chennai to Delhi. Hashtags flooded the internet. Candlelight marches lit up city squares. It was no longer just about Pollachi, it was about every girl who had been silenced, ignored, and discarded. Then, a breakthrough came unexpectedly. A fisherman off the Lakshadweep coast found a waterproof bag floating near the shore. Inside was a hard drive wrapped in plastic. It was turned over to the local police and eventually reached the central investigating team. What it contained changed everything. The drive had encrypted files of financial records, emails, and video footage not previously found. It revealed a new layer to the ring: connections to high-paying clients in Dubai, Singapore, and London. Sid had been selling content and victims internationally. The drive also had voice recordings of calls between Sid and Nikhil, planning the operation, naming officials who had helped protect them. This time, there was no room for denial. Arrest warrants were issued for more than 30 individuals across 5 states. Nikhil D'Souza was taken into custody again, this time under international trafficking charges. MLA Shyam Sundar Pillai resigned from his position amidst rising fury, and his properties were raided. Money, passports, and even private jet logs were found, proof of a system built to exploit and escape. Anvika, sitting quietly in court during the trial, didn't celebrate. She knew justice was complicated. Not all names would be punished. Some evidence might never make it to trial. But the silence had broken. The shame, the fear, it had shifted from the victims to the abusers. Pollachi had changed, so had India. For every girl still hiding in the shadows, afraid of speaking out there, was now a line drawn in history. A record of resistance. A moment when the victims fought back. The hunt for Sid Varan continued. His face was now on international watch lists, his name etched into police records across borders. But even if he was never found, his empire had already crumbled, and the voices he tried to silence had become the loudest in the country.